Another useful way of using the marquee tool is when we select something and we use our quick select option. By moving it, we can actually manipulate that object separate to the other. So I can come over to my paint bucket tool now, and we click on our paint bucket tool and choose any color we want, for example, that lovely red, and I can now paint bucket just inside the selection lines. Let me show you what happens if you deselect and you just click anywhere. It will fill the entire page. So you need to be careful if you want to use the fill tool that it's filling a complete enclosed area. And the way we saw it enclosed was, let me zoom in again, this dotted line that appears to be moving. Now they call this in Photoshop marching ants because it looks like ants sort of walking around the outside of the object, and that shows you where your selection is. Sometimes you'll have your brush tool ready to go, and let's put it back on black, and I want to do some drawing and I can't. As much as I click, I don't seem to be able to draw, and the reason is you can only manipulate within the selection area. So that's why when I used the paint bucket tool within the selection area, it was able to only affect that area. And you could even move back over to a brush tool, switch to our lovely red again, and you could just color it in because you cannot affect anything outside of those marching ants. So let's deselect that and zoom all the way out and look at another interesting tool that we can use. So sometimes we'll have an object, for example, this red line here. We've got it selected and we're ready to go, but we want to actually, rather than just moving it around on the page, up and down, left and right, we want to rotate it. And the way we can do that is to go into the Edit pull-down menu. Okay, the Edit pull-down menu gives you the transform options, scale, enables us to make it bigger or smaller, rotate allows us to rotate it, and we've got skew, distort, and work on perspectives. We can do all sorts of standard rotations like clockwise and anti-clockwise, and we can even flip it, which means this end would become that end, so it's almost like you've turned it over. But that is quite a complicated menu to use. Really all you need to remember is the free transform Ctrl+T shortcut, and you're going to be using that all the time. The reason for that is Ctrl+T will give you a bounding box, and again we've got a context sensitive menu up here which I'll explain in a minute, but essentially I can grab the corner of that box and I can stretch that object up or down or in any way, shape or form that I want to resize it. I can rotate it by hovering over the corner till I get that little rotate arrow, and then I can click and rotate. Okay? And I can also add perspective if I rotate it down, and by holding in the Control key, I can actually affect just one of the dots rather than all of them, and I can make it look like it's disappearing off into the distance. Now up here we have the buttons to say tick, yes, I like that, I would like to commit that transform, or you can hit the cancel transform and it will put it back to exactly how it was before you started, which is lovely. It saves you that Ctrl+Z. You can just hit escape instead. So let's Ctrl+T to free transform it again. And maybe sometimes we want to make something bigger, but we don't want to do what I did, which was distort it, and it gets all squishy and horrible. So you need to be really careful about this, especially when you're free transforming people, because when they look squished or stretched, it's going to absolutely hammer your mark. So let's just hit escape again, and this time Ctrl+T. And I can press this link. This is your width and this is your height. And you can link the two. So it means that when I pull, it will not change that aspect ratio. It'll always keep the same width to height ratio. So even though my width is 380% of what it was, it's also made my height 380% of what it was. You can also, pressing Ctrl+T without this linked, you can hold down Shift and it will have the same effect. If you hold down Shift when you're pulling on the corner, it maintains the aspect ratio. If you hold Control when you're pulling down on the corner, it allows you to pull out each individual point. So have a little practice with that. And make sure that you don't forget in Ctrl+T that you can also rotate. Now you might notice that over on this side we're starting to get quite a lot of layers and it's starting to get a little bit confusing. So I'm just going to collapse my properties panel there and I'm going to try and organize things here a little bit better. My background's got a name, so I've got layer 1, rectangle 1, layer 2, layer 3. This really isn't helping me. I don't know what's on any of these layers. But if you double click on the name, you'll see you can actually change it. So I can put silhouette on this one I can, what do we have here? The eyeball opens it. Oh, there we go. So that's a flower. You can name it flower. That one says tree, buffalo tree. Let's just call it tree. What's this one? Squiggle. Let's call that N because it's a little N that we can see, or an M. Rectangle's already got a name. And then this background layer here, which is a bit of a mess. We're just going to drag that and drop it in the bin. Now, sometimes you might not want to be able to see all the layers at the same time, and that's fine. I'm going to work with the flower and the silhouette and the tree later, but I'm not going to be using them now. So actually, next to the new layer button, you've got this folder looking button. And what that does is it creates a group, and we can call that group, let's just call it stuff for later for now. And I can grab my flower, and by holding Control, I can select other layers, and I can then drag that into that folder. And what's great about that is I can move the folder out of the way. And let me just show you this. If all of these are on, if I turn off the eye for the folder, it actually turns off all of the eyes for all of the other layers as well. So it's a great way of having whole areas of web pages or magazine covers disappear out the way so you can see your layout. It's a great way of just keeping yourself a little bit more organized. Sometimes when I've got something very important on one of my layers, I might even right click over here and give that layer a color so that it's easily found in the big stack of layers everywhere. So say I want to come back for this silhouette later, I might just remind myself by saying, yep, that's my silhouette. So what we've done there is some very basic Photoshop work. We've used our marquee tool in order to draw boxes and make selections. We have used our paintbrush tool in order to draw. We've used our erase tool in order to make some adjustments to the things that we've drawn. We've used the paint bucket tool in order to fill in spaces that we've selected using the marquee tool or objects we've selected. We've used the custom shape tool in order to draw boxes, and we can add specific borders to them and change their colors. And finally, we've used the zoom tool as well. You'll notice this little hand here, that is the hand tool, which I told you how to use pressing spacebar. You could also use H, but spacebar is much easier because it automatically toggles on and off when you let go of the spacebar. So actually, we have covered all of the basic tools.